Hello friends and welcome. Today I'm coming to you from my home shala, my little studio here at home, and I'm super excited to answer one of your questions. So I love answering student questions, so if you have a question for me, feel free to leave it and I will be happy to answer it. I'll talk more about that at the end of the video, but this question today was sent to me about knee hyperextension. So really quickly, the knee joint. Okay, the knee joint is more than a hinge joint. If you're an anatomy nerd, welcome back. And if you're not, welcome. But the hinge joint, typical hinge joint is like a door, right? You can open it and close it. It kind of moves in one direction. So of course the knee has hinge capabilities, right? Flexion and extension. It's a little more complex than just that because when you walk, there's also a kind of rotational component between the tibia and the femur, which we won't get into that today. But this is extension. My knees right now are in extension. Hyperextension is going to be when my knees extend past where they are right now. So a good way to show you that is to show you on my mat. So this is something I find to be really common in yogis, is hypermobility in the joints, and I have it myself. In yoga, oftentimes we see it as people able to get into really challenging poses really quote-unquote easily. I use quotes for that because it might not feel painful at the time, but over long periods of time, getting into these movements with extra flexibility in the joints can really do some wear and tear on the joints, and we like to prevent that if we can. So this is knee extension. Okay, my knees are extended. The joint between the femur and the tibia is extended, right? This would be flexion. Here's extension. Hyperextension, which not everyone can do, and if you can't do it, that's probably better for your joints' health. But hyperextension is this. You see how my heel is up off my mat? So that is a little test to see if you're hypermobile in your joints. Can you do this? And if you can, just know that you can, like, oh cool, I can do it. Don't make it something you do regularly because it's not good for the knee joints. It puts too much strain on the menisci and all of the soft tissue in the knee. So this is hyperextension. So the question was, how do I prevent hyperextension in seated forward fold? And it's a great question. I'm so glad it was asked, and I really think that it's something that we should look at a little bit. So we're going to do that today. So first off, if you'd like to join me on your mat, come to a seated position with your legs out long. The first way, because I have a few thoughts on how to address this, the first way to address it, because the student specifically said they have a hard time knowing when their knees are extended, meaning when it feels like their knees are extended, if they look down, their feet look like mine, and they're a few centimeters off the mat, which partially is just retraining your body to know, okay, this is extension as opposed to this being extension. And we can do that. We can retrain our bodies. It just takes some time and patience. So the first thing, there are a couple things I'd like to ask you guys to do here to help with this. And even if you don't have hyperextension in your knees, this can still help you to find more comfort in your seated forward fold. Paschimottanasana is what we're talking about here. So first and foremost, just to help connect your sit bones with the earth, you can take the fleshy part of your buttocks and scoot it behind you, not to the sides, but behind you. Out to the sides is sometimes instructed, but I find that puts too much pressure on the sciatic nerve, which is a no good to do, okay? This might be enough for you. Another option here is to take some blankets, and I like to take two. You can kind of experiment with what works best for you. But I'm going to stack them so that the folded edges are on top of each other, nice and neatly. And then I'm going to position them so that this triangular edge is going to be right where my pelvis is going to be. Okay, so I set them up this way, and then I sit down. Your pelvis is kind of like a triangle anyway. So if you imagine that here and here are your sit bones between my thumb and index finger, and then where my index fingers meet is your pubic symphysis right here at the front. That's kind of how I'm going to place myself on these blankets. So my sit bones actually are rolling off the blankets. Okay, so your sit bones are your big bony prominences you can feel here on the underside of your glutes, of your bum. And rather than sit my whole butt up on the blanket, that kind of defeats the purpose, because now I'm still sitting as though we're sitting on the floor. I let my pelvis inch forward. And when my sitting bones are off the blanket, the front of my pelvis can nutate forward, can kind of rotate forward and down. And that's what we're looking for. Okay? Another thing about seated forward fold, don't zip your legs up super tight. There's no need for that. You can feel free to give your legs a little breathing room here. I like to make mine about hip width apart. Okay? This in and of itself might be enough. And I'm giving you guys different levels because, of course, I'm not here with you guys in person and I can't really instruct you in that way. But because every body is different and you don't need to overdo something. If one of these modifications will work for you, stick with that modification. Okay, so this is another option. Now, for seated forward fold, I like to instruct it. Inhale the arms up and overhead. And we're working to bring our chest towards our thighs. Okay, but more importantly than that, we're working to keep our back straight. All right, so what I don't want you guys to do is to just tuck your chin and just start to reach like this. You can hear in my voice how that restricts my breathing. And it also puts a lot of strain on the discs in my back. Not good. Okay, so what we want to do is inhale and imagine it's like a standing forward fold, right? Where you imagine your pelvis coming up and over the heads of the femurs. Same. Okay, seated forward fold. Imagine your pelvis coming up and over the heads of your femurs. This might be as far as you get. That's fine. When you reach your point of maximum extension, you can bring your hands down and you could allow your chin to roll towards your chest. Don't be afraid to put a bolster between your thighs and your stomach, or a blanket, or a pillow, whatever you want to help give you some support there. Okay, eventually in time we might find that we can bring ourselves further and further down, but that is only if we're able to keep our back straight. Okay, we don't want to enter this pose like this. It's way too much strain on the intervertebral discs and on the low back. Okay, so you want to avoid that. So, for the question about knee hyperextension, notice how this feels here. I personally feel like the strain on my knees is gone because when I'm sitting up on these blankets, my heels are rooted into the earth. And I don't have to try to strain my knees to do that. So try this. This might be enough for that. If this is not enough, if you are in this pose and you still feel like my feet are still lifted because the backs of my knees are still trying to touch the earth, we can use props, okay? You can grab a blanket, and I'm just going to do a gentle roll, a loose roll, all right? It doesn't have to be super thick. It depends on how much space is between your knees and the floor. And I'm just going to slide it under my knees. And then I'm effectively sending feedback to my brain. I'm telling that, oh, look, the floor is hitting my knees, so there's no need to try to drive my kneecaps into the earth because the earth has come up to me. Okay, so this might be one way to kind of retrain the brain, like, this is extension. There's a slight bend, and that's okay. Extension can have a slight bend. That also helps to kind of protect the soft tissue here. And again, this roll can be as deep or as shallow as you want it to be. Right? This, you can slowly work your way down too. You can start with a thicker roll, and then you can work your way down to a thinner roll if you like to. And you might find that one day you don't even need it, and you just start to feel like, okay, that's what extension feels like for me. You might always want to use this blanket, and that's okay too. I'm a huge believer in the use of props for support. So in regards to what kinds of props to use, good old blanket, that's what I would use. And the other thing I mentioned before, you might find that it feels more supportive to have the blanket here, right into your hip creases. So when you come forward, you have that feedback from the blanket to keep that back long, like that. Okay, so to recap, I would say start off trying to make modifications to your seat first. Maybe that's just scooting the fleshy part of the buttocks behind you to reconnect with the earth. Maybe it's sitting up on a blanket or two or three, depends on your body. That helps you really connect the pelvis And for me personally, I feel like my heels are better connected when I'm up on these blankets, and then my knees can just kind of passively fill in the gap between pelvis and heels. And then finally, use a prop. Blanket, pillow. I love blankets. They're probably my favorite prop because they're so versatile. And it's just a simple little roll here with the blanket that can be really, really useful for that. Okay, so hopefully that helps. I'm also going to post a video here about some exercises that we can do to help strengthen the ligaments and the tendons as well as the muscles surrounding the knee. Because if you're experiencing knee hyperextension in seated forward fold, there are some exercises we can do to strengthen the connective tissue of the knee so that it's less prone to hyperextension, so that the ligaments kind of hold it in alignment, which can be very, very helpful as well. So I'll post that along with this video too. And finally, if you guys have any questions for me, anatomy questions, yoga asana questions, I would love to receive them. It would help keep me busy during our stay-at-home quarantine, and I appreciate that. So you can feel free to leave questions down in the comments section below, or you can email me, and I'll put my email in the description, redftjen@gmail.com. Both viable, and I would love to receive your questions and to help you guys out, and any kind of anatomy-based questions you have. So hopefully that helps to address this question of knee hyperextension and seated forward fold. And I wish you guys many joyous practicing sessions. Take care of yourselves. Namaste.